Rent goes up when the balance between available homes and people needing homes changes. You might see it when more renters competing for the same units gives landlords pricing power. What matters underneath is that the rise may feel personal, but it often comes from market pressure. If it is ignored, supply and demand sit behind many rent increases. Population growth can raise demand. One ordinary version is a city adding jobs attracts workers who need housing. The mechanism is that new residents compete for existing apartments. The practical effect is if construction does not keep up, rents can climb quickly. Limited new construction tightens supply. Consider permits, land costs, zoning, financing, and labor shortages can slow building. The hidden part is that fewer new units mean less relief for renters. The outcome is often that scarcity appears as higher monthly payments. Inflation raises landlord costs. The pattern shows up when repairs, insurance, utilities, management, and materials can all become more expensive. The moving force is that owners may pass some costs to tenants when leases renew. The risk is that rent often rises after the owner's expenses rise. Property taxes can push rent upward. In a daily situation, a higher assessed value may increase the owner's tax bill. The link is that landlords factor taxes into long-term pricing. Once that link matters, tenants may feel the increase even though they do not pay the tax directly. Insurance costs can affect rent. The clearest example is higher premiums for storms, fires, liability, or building risk raise operating costs. The explanation starts with owners need enough rental income to keep the property viable. The consequence is risky locations may see stronger pressure. Interest rates matter for new landlords. For example, higher mortgage payments can raise the cost of owning rental property. The reason is that investors may need higher rent to make the numbers work. That can mean expensive financing can also reduce new supply. Renovations can lead to increases. In real life, new appliances, flooring, security, or building upgrades may justify higher rent. The pressure comes from this. The owner tries to recover improvement costs. The result can be tenants should separate real upgrades from cosmetic excuses. Neighborhood change affects pricing. Think of a new transit line, university expansion, or business district can raise demand nearby. The process works because location becomes more valuable when daily life becomes clearer. Over time, existing renters may face pressure from new interest. Short-term rentals can reduce long-term supply. A simple case is this. Some owners choose nightly rentals if they earn more. The important driver is that fewer traditional units remain available. That is why local rules often respond when residents are priced out. Lease renewal timing matters. You might see it when rent often changes when a lease ends rather than every month. What matters underneath is that the renewal date is the legal and practical checkpoint. If it is ignored, tenants should prepare before that date arrives. Vacancy rates reveal landlord leverage. One ordinary version is low vacancy means renters have fewer alternatives. The mechanism is that high vacancy forces owners to compete. The practical effect is rent growth often slows when empty units become common. Wage growth does not always keep up. Consider rent can rise because housing demand is strong even when incomes lag. The hidden part is that this creates affordability stress. The outcome is often that a market can be profitable for owners while difficult for renters. Some increases are limited by law. The pattern shows up when rent control or notice requirements may cap or delay increases. The moving force is that rules differ by location and property type. The risk is that tenants should not assume every increase is automatically allowed. Landlords may test the market. In a daily situation, an owner may list higher to see whether tenants accept. The link is that pricing is adjusted when applications do not arrive. Once that link matters, a renewal offer can sometimes be negotiated with comparable evidence. Moving costs give landlords leverage. The clearest example is even if rent rises, a tenant may stay because moving is expensive and disruptive. The explanation starts with the cost of leaving affects the bargaining balance. The consequence is inertia can make increases easier to impose. Rent can rise even when service does not improve. For example, market demand may allow higher prices without upgrades. The reason is that this feels unfair to renters. That can mean the explanation may be scarcity rather than better quality. Tenants can respond with information. In real life, checking comparable rents, documenting maintenance issues, and asking early can help negotiation. The pressure comes from this. Emotion alone is less persuasive than evidence. The result can be planning gives more options than reacting at the deadline. Rent increases are usually a mix of forces. Think of demand, supply, costs, financing, taxes, and neighborhood change can all combine. The process works because one simple reason rarely explains every increase. Over time, the strongest response starts with identifying which force is active locally. Rent increases becomes clearer when it is tested in ordinary life. Take property tax rise. The point is visible in a property tax rise. The choice changes because rent increases changes the pressure around the decision. What matters is the real consequence for the people involved, not just the clean definition of rent increases. When the example is concrete, rent increases stops sounding abstract and starts looking like something people deal with in real conversations, bills, deadlines, and relationships. Another useful angle is insurance cost jump. Low vacancy in a neighborhood shows how one background condition can change the outcome before anyone calls it a big event. For rent increases, the hidden force may be demand, taxes, insurance, repairs, or bargaining power. Once those forces are separated, the increase becomes easier to question or plan around. A rent increase is easier to understand when it is tied to taxes, repairs, demand, financing cost, or a lease renewal rather than treated as a random jump. A shallow reading treats every increase as the same and misses the reason behind the new number. In the case of low vacancy in a neighborhood, the final result may look simple from the outside, but the pressure was already building before anyone noticed it. Better judgment starts by asking what changed since the last rent was set. A practical example is renovation costs passed through. The practical point is not to memorize a slogan about rent increases. The practical point is to understand whether the rise comes from market pressure, property cost, or negotiation power. That contrast explains why a rent increase can come from several forces at the same time. Most confusion around rent increases comes from missing that hidden exchange and focusing only on the surface event. Rent rises when the landlord's costs, market demand, or bargaining power change. The renter feels one price, but several forces may be pushing it. A final example, tenant income not rising as fast, shows why this matters before the outcome becomes expensive, stressful, or emotionally charged. The strongest takeaway is to ask what changed before deciding how to respond. The practical point is to understand whether the rise comes from market pressure, property cost, or negotiation power. Once those parts are visible, rent increases becomes less mysterious and much easier to handle in daily life.